So we have finally gotten the post from Chris about what happened with 3.19, what their philosophies and the whole reason behind the decisions that they made that led us to the current absolute dumpster fire that is Path of Exile and the community behind it. I'll be kind of honest with you at this point. I'm very drama fatigued. The community is absolutely raising to a fever pitch at this point, and I think the reason for that is that in general, gaming communities tend to explode in drama when the game itself is not good. I don't think the game is in a good place right now. Regardless of what this post says, I've read through it already, I've thought about it already, I don't think that the game is currently in a good spot. The changes that they have already communicated that they were going to be doing, I don't think that those changes are going to put the game in a good spot. However, I do need to give credit where credit is due. So we're going to talk about all of that, we're going to go through the posts, but I want to give a small update on what's going on with me. Some of you might have noticed that I just haven't been streaming. I haven't logged into Path of Exile a single time in the last 2 or 3, maybe 4 days. I don't know how long it's been at this point. Days are all kind of melding together right now. But as for my YouTube content that I'm going to be making, until we see some pretty massive changes, I don't think I'm going to be making normal PoE content on YouTube. Meaning that you're probably not going to get very many dedicated videos to builds of currency farming strategies, anything like that. You're probably not going to get anything like that from me for a little bit. And what I'm going to be focusing on is I'm going to be focusing on trying to give the best feedback that I can to GDG, go over some of these mechanics, get my thoughts all consolidated about them, and post videos with as good of feedback as I possibly can. That's what I'm going to be focusing on for the near future. Now, I'll probably stream a lot of that. The plan is at this point that I still do want to try to go full time, but I've had to completely put a halt on those plans as it is right now. All of my PoE effort over the last 3 or 4 days has almost completely been spent on Twitter trying to give feedback and trying to post, and of course memeing it up a little bit as well, because it is Twitter after all. But that's been the main focus for me recently. And now enough about me. Let's get into the post. All right, so be ready for a bit of a read. We've got a lot to go through here. There's a lot of waxing philosophic here and a lot of things to go through. So what happened with items? Lake of Kalandra saw a number of balance changes that were not properly communicated before release. After a week of addressing feedback with hotfixes, we have written this post to explain what our intention was, what went wrong, how we have fixed it, and to reassure you about the direction we intend to go in the future. I don't think very many things have been fixed, if I'm going to be honest with you. They said they've got a bit of a backstory. So they're going to talk about their philosophy and why they've made the changes that they've made. Philosophy 1, reward mechanisms should scale properly with item quantity and rarity bonuses. Conceptually, I agree with what they're saying here. I get it, but in actuality, it hasn't really turned up too great. Now, they talk about the reward system, the templates, the little icons that you see above monsters' heads. And they've said, Path of Exile is a game about opting into more difficulty in exchange for more rewards. You can roll your maps to be harder or add sections to them. You can play with additional party members. You can trigger additional stacking league content like Delirium. All of these things make the game harder in exchange for more and better items. It's weird that they say this, and I will just be honest that it's very strange that they say this, because this is one of my main concerns with Path of Exile that I feel is being absolutely avoided in fixing. The fact that the more that you invest into your maps right now, the more that you invest in running harder content, the less rewards you actually get per time and effort spent. That's one of the main actual issues that I have with the game right now, and they admit that, but then say that they fixed it. Let's continue. The way we achieve more and better is through item quantity and item rarity bonuses. Item quantity means you directly find more stuff, and item rarity means that it has a higher chance of upgrading to magic, rare, or unique. Item templates ignored quantity and rarity bonuses. This is the main reason why item template type stuff like chests and things like that are the only thing that are good in Path of Exile right now. And a template of drop 4 rare jewels just did exactly that, regardless of how much extra difficulty you would stack. From the 3.19 expansion onwards, we're trying to make sure that the reward systems scale with player item quantity and rarity bonuses. That's why the reward conversion system that higher tier arch nemesis monsters have is so powerful. Any bonuses that you have from additional difficulty will affect the rewards that the rare monsters drop. Additional item quantity causes them to drop more items that are converted, and additional item rarity causes those items to upgrade, which also affects the converted one. For example, if you upgrade a rare item to a unique item and then it's converted to a currency item, it'll drop as a Divine Orb, Exalted Orb, or Orb of Annulment. Now, he will talk about this again later in the post, but I really need to address the elephant in the room here with this item conversion system, is that I genuinely think that we have regressed Path of Exile's item drop system like 10 years into the past. The item drop system right now is equivalent to on-release Diablo 3. Previously, one of the main reasons that I really enjoyed Path of Exile was the fact that as you scaled the difficulty of the content up, you got equal results from the like percentage that you scaled it up. Now, the problem here is that if you scale up the difficulty substantially high, you don't get equal rewards. You just get basically you lose out because of the cost of all of this scaling. Now, what do I mean by we have like regressed to Diablo 3? I'm not sure if you guys have seen it yet, but there are like posts going around of people finding this Lunaris enchanted monster with like all these different mods on them and it exploding into an absurd amount of currency, right? I don't know if the one picture that a lot of people are putting around where it's like 50 divine orbs and stuff like, I don't know if that's real. If I'm going to be honest with you, it looks a little far-fetched, but I honestly don't know at the end of the day. However, assuming that stuff like that is real, assuming that you can get that much currency and that much rewards, even a fifth of that from one monster, is that really what we want? Do we want literal loot goblins from Diablo 3 running around? If you guys don't remember, I played Diablo 3 on release. I no-lifed that game. I remember logging in and watching Crypt do stuff, and you know what the main way to farm stuff was in that game? Towards the very beginning of the game, you literally logged in to the game, right? Like you logged into your character, you ran into a zone, walked forward ignoring all of the monsters, tried to see if there was a loot goblin there. If there wasn't one, you restarted the game, you ran in until you found one and you killed it and you picked up the items from it. That was the way that you found items in Diablo 3 towards the beginning of it. This is the equivalent of what this currently is. Right now, the way that you make these big currency explosions happen is you need to find this 1 in a million arch nemesis mob that has crazy rarity stacked on it because of various different mechanics. The way that you get it is you have to find a rare mob with the Lunaris mod. I have seen this once since I started playing in 3.19. I haven't played that much, but I saw it one time, and a lot of people have been saying that even me seeing it one time in that regard was relatively lucky. Not only that, but you have to get that Lunaris mod in combination with other modifiers that do very specific things, and then you also need to have scaled the rarity and quantity bonuses enough to be able to get those things to explode. One of the ways that you would do this is with a remnant that spawns from Expedition that gives you a bunch of rarity on Expedition rares. Well, guess what? The levels of like obfuscation there to be able to get all of the different things at one time is absurd. You see these crazy screenshots on Reddit, but it's not going to happen to you in game. You might get a little itty bitty teensy explosion one time where you get like 2 exalted orbs and maybe 1 whole divine, but that's going to happen like 1 out of 1,000, 1 out of 10,000 rares that you kill. It's an absurdly low amount, and it's not really even that cool at the end of the day. When it's that rare, where you're incentivized to just jump into maps and go for hours to be able to find this one mob that'll finally give you something good, it just genuinely, I don't know if that's what I would want out of playing Path of Exile. I kind of just want to kill a whole bunch of monsters and find items off of all of the monsters. So moving on, philosophy 2. Players should fight fewer rare monsters at once, but they should be more challenging and rewarding. Conceptually, as I've said from the very beginning, I agree with this. However, in fights with a lot of rare monsters on screen, you can't follow what modifiers they have, what skills they're using, and sometimes not even what type of monsters they are. There's too much to pay attention to. With too much noise and screen pollution, you cannot use appropriate combat tactics and instead have to just stutter step or be so powerful that it's inconsequential. That is not different right now. The problem now is that, yeah, you can kind of see what's killing you, but it really genuinely doesn't matter if you can see the one mob that's killing you, if it like teleports in from off screen at maximum speed and then one-shots you before you can do anything to it. Or this is hopefully being addressed in the like patch that we're now not getting until Monday, apparently, where they're going to reduce some of the defenses, but you can run into arch nemesis mobs that are just almost unkillable. And now when you see one of those unkillable arch nemesis mods, you're going to look at it and you're going to be like, oh, well, it doesn't have the good modifiers. Guess I'll just skip this one, and you run away from it. Because why are you going to spend 5 minutes killing an enemy that doesn't drop anything for you? It's incentivizing people to not kill specific things. If you remember in Arch Nemesis League itself, there were only very specific combinations that people even cared to pick up, right? So now they've just made it so that in the entirety of the whole game, there are only certain kinds of rare monsters that people are even going to care to kill. If the monsters are absurdly powerful and absurdly defensive, and they don't have those good modifiers, they're just going to be skipped now, instead of people just trying to kill them. Yeah, when people have infinite amounts of gear, they'll just one-shot them without even thinking about it, but at that point, the loot from them doesn't matter. So fewer, more difficult rares help you pay attention to what is happening, assess it, and act accordingly. Yeah, and acting accordingly most of the time right now is just running away from them. It gives you an opportunity to employ counterplay and for your play skill to actually... Yeah, okay, whatever, dude. Rewards should be set appropriately for the increased difficulty of these rare monsters. I agree. And currently, they are not. Even with the, like, loot conversion and all the stuff that we've got right now, you're basically just endlessly chasing that loot goblin that you're hoping to find after, like, 200 maps. Philosophy 3. There shouldn't be a large gap between the difficulty and rewards of League content and base game content. Monsters added in Leagues are more difficult to kill and drop better items than regular ones encountered in the base game. When those Leagues become core, these properties carry across, creating 2 tiers of content, with one far more rewarding than the others. And I never really saw that there was a problem with that. The base game has so few mobs and so few enemies in it that isn't it just okay to reward people for trying to learn and trying to get better at the game and experience more of it? Why are we making it so that there is less top end to move towards? That's always been the beauty of Path of Exile. The fact that you can learn and experience and become better at the game, understand how to juice, and understand how to scale these rewards up so amazingly, essentially. So now it just feels like you almost get punished for knowing more about the game. Now it feels like we're going to be moving towards this feeling where people are just going to be alking and going, and that's all that they do. And if that's the way that they want the game to be, then so be it, but it leaves very, very little at the top end to really strive for. If you don't have any interest in doing like uber bosses and things, what do you have to do? Eventually you're going to get bored of just running alk and go maps all day. I mean, do you not want to try to push the game to its theoretical limits? That's one of the things that Path of Exile is known for. We feel it's good for League content to be harder than the base game and therefore more rewarding, yet you don't make it rewarding enough. But the difference should be approximately twice as rewarding. The problem that I feel here is, like, they say things like, if the gap were any larger, then it would be less efficient to kill regular monsters, and a player should spend all of their time focusing on repeating a small subset of content. But that's exactly what you're pushing people into doing. That's the thing that I don't understand, is that average, like, normal players already just did whatever, right? They just ran around and killed monsters normally. They didn't even juice their content at all. That's why they're average and normal players. They're just running around doing maps and doing stuff. As soon as you learn how to do more in maps, and as soon as you learn how to be more efficient and better at the game, you would juice more and you would focus on these little things. One of the beauties of Path of Exile is the fact that there is such a wide variety of different things that you could focus on, because that's the thing that you enjoy. Why are you wanting to punish people if someone really just enjoys doing heists, or someone enjoys doing delve, or whatever is the modifier or the thing that they like farming? Why should they be punished for wanting to focus on that one little thing? Why does it matter if people want to focus on specific things? I don't understand. Your philosophy is not congruent with the changes that you are making here. Lake of Kalandra balance changes, rare monster normalization. A lot of League content was spawning way too many rare monsters compared to the rest of the game. I agree. In line with Philosophy 2 and general player concerns about being overwhelmed by too many hard arch nemesis monsters in some encounters, we reviewed most League content in Path of Exile with the goal of making rare encounters more consistent. There are 3 changes that needed to happen at the same time. The addition of interesting rewards of some arch nemesis mods that scale with both item rarity and quantity. That's fine. I don't exactly mind this. And yield very valuable outcomes of combining the right combinations to create moments of excitement as valuable reward drops. But is this not just you admitting that these moments of excitement are literally just the loot goblins that I was talking about? They're far too rare. People don't care about 800 blacksmith whetstones or like 40 flash dropping on the ground. The only one that people are really at the end of the day going to care about is the loot explosion one, and it's absurdly rare. Like, sure, finding like corrupted uniques and all this stuff and getting these perfect immaculate combinations is cool, but they don't happen that often, and the rest of the loot in the game feels really, really bad. An adjustment to the average number of arch nemesis modifiers on rare monsters to increase difficulty, justify the higher rewards, and create more random, interesting encounters that add variance to the gameplay. I genuinely don't really know that this happened. I guess that there's more random encounters that are somewhat interesting, but I wouldn't say they're interesting in a necessarily good way. I would say that they are just kind of frustrating now. Most of the time, I find a rare monster and it's either just like an unbelievably big tanky behemoth, or it kind of just one-shots me without me being able to do anything about it. Everything in between, it doesn't really feel very meaningful or notable in any way. It just kind of feels like a random monster running around that's a little bit more tanky than everything else and doesn't really ever really drop very much more than anything else. What I would personally like to see here is I would personally like to see some kind of like system put in place where we can get monsters that have a pretty standardized set of like modifiers they could get. Maybe like 2 offensive modifiers and 2 defensive modifiers. I don't know how to do this. I'm not a game developer, but right now it just kind of feels like you run into an arch nemesis mod with 4 big defensive modifiers and it just straight up doesn't die. There's just no amount of damage that you can do to it that matters. And if there's a mob that shows up in that regard, you're going to look at the modifiers and be like, all right, well, I don't see Innocence touched. I don't see Katava touched. I don't see any of the good ones. All right, I'm going to skip it. The other side of this is that you're going to run into an arch nemesis mob that is so powerful and does so much damage and moves so quickly that it can kill some of the best players in the game with the most defensive possible gear that they can get before they can react, before they are able to log out. Like, I watched a clip of Karn get absolutely demolished by this giant random minotaur that was running at the speed of light and almost one-shot him, killed him within a second. That's ridiculous. And this is a guy playing in hardcore solo self-found, so he's obviously not juicing his maps as much as he possibly can and putting himself into these insane dangerous positions. It's just like, bro, rebalance of arch nemesis modifiers to account for the fact that rare monsters now have multiple modifiers more frequently. This step is not performed until after release feedback came in. It was not deemed necessary at the time and required extensive community feedback before we did it. This was a mistake and we should have not been so stubborn about it. I agree, and thank you for owning up to that. But yeah, I mean, it's still not fixed by any means. It still needs a lot more work, but okay. As described above, various valuable arch nemesis modifiers convert drops in a way that directly benefits from item rarity and item quantity bonuses. When we were balancing and testing this, we wondered why certain league monsters were dropping significantly more items than regular monsters. It turned out this was due to an item rarity or quantity bonuses that were historically applied to monsters to make leagues feel rewarding. When combined with the new drop conversion system, these bonuses stacked exponentially and caused far too many rewards. I can admit that maybe at the very, very super high end, there were probably too many things dropping on the ground. That is something that I can admit. I think that maybe it was tuned a little bit too much. In line with Philosophy 3, we rebalanced League monsters so that they were twice as rewarding as regular monsters and didn't have these existing bonuses. I thought it was 2 to 3 times as much, but to be clear, the bonuses were inconsistent and arbitrary. For example, Yellow Beast dropped more items than Red Beast. Incursion monsters didn't have any increased quantity, just increased rarity, but Harvest monsters had both. This change was not mentioned in the patch notes, and that was one of my main concerns. Now we go to Beyond. This was beyond broken for map juicing, sometimes spawning over 200 unique monsters in a map. The amount of items that came from Beyond was just ridiculous. It's not okay for 15,000 unique items to drop in the same map. The new version is more reasonable, allowing up to 1 unique boss per map, which is honestly a gigantic nerf. It is, but I can see why you would want to change that. It's understandable, as long as you give something back in return. But it was intentional, and we mentioned in the live stream it was reworked with more details in the patch notes. I will say that Beyond was communicated well, but the issue with Beyond was the next line. While we took away the extreme juice opportunity, we added a dedicated reward for Beyond tainted currency items, and tainted currency items are absolutely useless for the most part right now. The ones that people were the most interested in just simply are not worth using as they are right now. It is more efficient to just use the bench to like fuse something instead of using a tainted fusing. They've said that they're going to fix this. They said that they're going to look into it, but they haven't yet, and I haven't heard a lot about Beyond items, so we'll see on that one. As for what went wrong, we didn't patch note the item rarity quantity rebalance for League monsters. This was an oversight due to human error, but that's why I proofread the patch notes. Unfortunately, due to the next point, this wasn't caught during my proofread. I didn't actually understand the impact of this change. This is not something that I'm surprised about. Chris Wilson has said that he is very hands-off with the actual development of the game, and that's fine. It was mentioned to me in passing that we were removing the league monster bonuses and replacing with just quantity, and I didn't ask any more questions. I was busy, distracted, and should have sought more information. Had I understood the consequences, we likely would have still gone ahead with the change, but hopefully with better communication and maybe some pre rather than post-release counterbalances elsewhere. This is a massive internal communication mess up, and I take full responsibility for it. This is one of the things that I was the most upset about when it came to the patch as a whole and the circumstances around it. As you might have known, one of my biggest problems here was it felt like GGG was being just sneaky. It felt like they were hiding these things on purpose or something. However, this is understandable. We are all human at the end of the day, and sometimes humans make mistakes no matter how good at something that they are. And I can't judge someone for the fact that they have made a mistake and they are willing to own up to it. What I can judge is the way that things go forward from here. So, GGG, I see that you are saying that you are making changes for this, that you are working on it, and that it's not going to happen in the future. I just really genuinely hope that that is the case, because there's been a few times in the past where not so significant of things have happened, but there have been some times in the past where communication was definitely rough. This was easily the worst communication mishap, I guess that you could call it, that we've ever had. I have not been the best with communication in the past, but I'm also not a multi-million-dollar corporation that has tens of 20s of humans that are all working on this. I do my best to improve in these kinds of areas, and I feel that you should as well. Hopefully we don't see anything like this going forward, and hopefully there are things that are going to be put into place that won't allow things like this to happen, because honestly, I mean, we're getting to the bottom of the barrel on being able to accept these just massive changes that completely bait people into, you know, playing the league and buying mystery boxes and buying packs of items and supporter packs and stuff like that, and then finding out after they've purchased all of these things and after they've moved through all these things, a huge change to the game happened, right? There's a lot of people who do really big juicing maps who spend hundreds and thousands of dollars on this game. Now, I mean, you could say that that's ridiculous, and I agree that maybe it's a little ridiculous for spending so much money on this game, but these people exist, and they probably feel very, very wronged that they spend all this money on supporter packs and stuff, and then something that is so consequential as this change is just completely missed, and now the thing that they like doing is now completely and utterly gone. So really, really hope that this doesn't happen again in the future. But there's more to talk about here. There was not sufficient time to playtest the change properly for feeling. It is unacceptable that I allowed a change like that to make it into the patch without a big chunk of time allocated to making sure the game still feels great afterwards. Absolutely agreed. I also overstated the impact of the change when communicating about it in this post. I said we removed a massive historic bonus, and this caused the community to think the impact was larger than it was. I genuinely still feel that it was a pretty large impact. The reason why I used the word massive was that the numbers sound big when viewed in isolation, but are less impactful when viewed in context. For example, the rarity bonus that was removed from a red beast was 750%. This sounds big, but a 4-mod Arch Nemesis rare has a 41,000% bonus. Players have been saying we reduce drops by 90%, but in reality, that type of difference could only be true in the most extreme situations involving Beyond, Delirium, and Incursion stacked with party quantity, rarity Sextant Scarabs, and a dedicated MF Kohler, peak efficiency of every juice mechanism that exists. I don't necessarily agree there. Every other player is unaffected on average. For example, when playing Breach, the reduction in currency items found is around 7%. When comparing 3.19 to 3.18, in 100% Delirium maps, the difference hits 17%. In Incursion and regular non-league content, you'll find 25% more. The major problem that I have with this whole section right here is that there's a lot of hyperbolic speaking going on here. Saying that the only people who can see these massive differences are people who are doing Beyond Delirium, Incursion, party quantity, rarity, Sextant Scarabs, dedicated MF cult. No, that's not the case. Those kinds of people are running into 98 to 99% reduction in the amount of items that they're getting. If you're doing any kind of juice, which I think is one of the cornerstones of PoE and getting good at PoE at this point, these percentages are going to multiply. That's just how these things work. This is math. When he says every other player is unaffected on average, I mean, are we averaging in people who never make it to maps? Yeah, they're unaffected because they don't actually get to maps. Who are we averaging into this? Every other player? When you say that people who are playing Breach, I don't know anybody that plays Breach. I I don't think of the game in these terms. Like I'm a pretty experienced player of this game. I'm someone that knows quite a bit, but I'm not even like the most like big boy juicer that's out there. I'm not even close, right? I've done some of it. You've seen my videos about like doing like the big triple beyond, all kinds of stuff. Like I've done it. I'm not one that really fancies that kind of stuff. But when you say people who play Breach, how many of you out there like log into Path of Exile every day and be like, yep, dude, I'm gonna put Breach on my map and put as many breaches on my map and I'm gonna do Breach all day? I mean, I get it, but it's like you could say that about maybe Expedition, or you could say that about Heist. You could say that about like a lot of things, but Breach, Delirium, Incursion? I don't know, man. I feel like this is out of touch. Honestly, I just kind of feel like this is coming from someone who doesn't play the game. I know that that's a fact, but still. The next mistake we made was related to item culling. I'm pretty sure I spoke about this on a podcast at some stage, but a while ago we introduced a system that culls some percentage of relevant normal and magic items before the items drop in higher level areas. These are items that would almost certainly be filtered out by almost any item filter and are almost never picked up. The intention is to reduce clutter substantially without actually affecting any items a player would pick up. That's absolutely fine. We've been gradually raising this culling value over time as we try to find a sweet spot that has the best performance impact with no gameplay impact. To be clear, this system doesn't affect things like rare items, currency, maps, etc. A few weeks before Lake of Kalandra launch, we raised the rate again. This means that if you're counting the raw number of irrelevant equipment items on the ground, some of the reduction is due to this harmless culling system rather than actual. No one is complaining about this. No one is complaining about this. No one is complaining about irrelevant items on the ground because we literally don't even see them. There is no shot, no way that someone who is as good at the game as a lot of the people who have been concerned about this is accounting for irrelevant equipment items that are falling on the ground. There's no shot that they're doing that. They're looking at the amount of items that they pick up with the same exact filters compared to the same items that they got the last patch, the same items that they got the patch before that, and so on and so forth. They're not looking at these items. They're completely filtered out, as you just got done saying. So no one is counting the number of irrelevant equipment items in the ground. Not a soul. In addition, Lake of Kalandra is an out-of-area league. Its rewards entirely come from the lake itself rather than from your maps. This is in stark contrast to Sentinel, our last league, which has not only dropped rewards in your maps, it was honestly tuned higher than average in terms of league rewards. Which it was. It did drop just an absolutely ridiculous amount of things, and that's because that was the entirety of the mechanic, just the fact that it dropped a whole bunch of stuff. Which, guess what? People loved. People went from receiving masses of league rewards as they clear maps to receiving absolutely nothing from the league until they traveled to the lake. This is unfortunate timing and exacerbated the perception of drop reduction. Honestly, not really. It did in some cases, sure, people who are specifically playing Sentinel versus people who are specifically doing Lake of Kalandra, but I think that most people understand how these kinds of things work. The real problem is the fact that you spend all this time building up this massive Lake of Kalandra, and then the Lake of Kalandra itself is useless. I think it would have been fine if the next thing that they talk about, the lake itself, was also relatively unrewarding on release, and this has since been massively increased since then. Has it though? I don't know. I still haven't seen anybody say that the lake is good. Most of the big brain people who really push these mechanics early on are still not saying that it's very good. So has it though? Has it been fixed? The remaining things that went wrong pertain to post-release communication. It took us several days to hotfix many of the changes in, and while we have posted about it each day, this full explanation took almost a week. I wish we could have done it faster, but we have tried to prioritize working on the actual fixes as quickly as we can. As the confusion about our motivations has raised a lot of concern with the community, I should have found a way to prioritize writing this post. All that I really want to say about this is that I appreciate that you're trying to actually change and stuff like that. Like, you're trying to prioritize working on the actual fixes, but yeah, I think maybe the communication should have been of a little bit better quality, and I really do think the ball was completely dropped on communication. Absolutely. It is roughly half of the reason why I am as upset as I am this league in general. Now we're going to talk about improvements to testing and communication in the future. There's a lot to unpack from the above pile of mistakes. I believe that the intention was good, but there were significant deficiencies in testing and communication. I can agree with that. I take personal responsibility for those areas because they happen on my watch. I'm the game director for Path of Exile 1. This is weird language, but we'll skip it. And it is absolutely unacceptable that I can miss a change that has the consequences that the League Monster 1 did. Changes like that need to be very, very carefully tested, have their consequences fully understood, and then be communicated clearly. I have let you down, and I will not allow it to happen again. I think that this is the most important part of the entirety of this piece of text that Chris has written to us. He has said that he will not allow it to happen again. Now, I don't think that you should be singling out Chris for any reason, But I just want you to say, hold GGG accountable to these kinds of things if you want Path of Exile to be good in the future. I am 100% understanding that this kind of thing happened. However, at the end of the day, GGG is a business. They are meant to make money, and consumers are here to purchase the product and consume the product that they have made. If you follow through on this kind of promise, then there won't be issues with this in the future. If you just endlessly spend the goodwill of the consumer, eventually the consumer will move on. I know a lot of people have moved on at this point. This is some of the worst retention that we've ever had percentage-wise out of Path of Exile's history. So I really genuinely hope that for the future of Path of Exile, we really don't get these kinds of big mistakes again. I want to emphasize that our quality assurance team are not to blame for the issues that were not discovered before release. They work really hard and have a lot of limitations that are outside of their control. The next upcoming release, I'm specifically trying to integrate them more into development so that we get their feedback during the development of features. This is something I've been saying for quite a while. I think that it's wrong to give the QA team any kind of problems for the things that happen. This is a dev issue. This is absolutely a dev issue. The developers are the ones that decide what the quality assurance needs to work on. The quality assurance provides the information to the dev teams, and then the dev team does what it does with that. I genuinely really hope that the QA team is able to do their job as best as humanly possible, and the dev team works with them on it. I really hope so. And now we get to the part that people are going to be upset about. So where does this leave us? For players who are juicing their content to extreme levels with 6-person parties, dedicated MF colors, and stacked league mechanics, they no longer have Beyond to push things over the edge. But they still find ridiculous amounts of stuff. I've seen parties in this league get multiple mirrors per day or find over 50 divine orbs from a single monster. This is something I actually take quite a bit of problem with. Why is this something that you think that's okay? Like, why you remember I spoke earlier about the whole like divine orb explosion thing. Is this okay? Like, is this an okay thing to happen? Honestly, I personally don't think that it is, because the problem is that when you put an average of all of the currency that drops over the course of time, and then there's this one really big moment that happens after a certain point of time, it completely skews the average. So if someone goes and they log in and they play Path of Exile for 2 or 3 hours and they get 15 maps done, they might not have a single good experience in that whole 2 to 3 hours. Do you think that they're going to come back the next day? I don't know that I would. Now, if you play 8 hours a day, 16 hours a day, like some of the hardcore, like big brain juicers and streamers and content creators and stuff, of course you're going to see these big drops. Of course you're going to be okay. But when we're talking about like a mom or a dad that comes home from work, has kids that they have to feed and kids that they want to spend time with, and like family members and friends and all this stuff, and then they sit down at the end of the night, they play Path of Exile for 2 or 3 hours, and they just feel like they've been absolutely, completely forgotten because nothing happened for them in that time. Bubblegum currency is at the smallest amount that it's ever been. They can't really find items to be able to continue and do the progression that they want to. These people are just going to leave. They're getting shafted the most out of everyone else, and it's really unfortunate because it's like, that's a huge percentage of the player base, but I guess at the end of the day, it is what it is. For regular players who are just alking their maps and adding difficulty where they feel they can handle it, we think the drops are in a pretty good place after this week's changes. Refer to what I just said 30 seconds ago. They should have been like this at release, and I'm deeply sorry that they were not. Refer to what I said 35 seconds ago. Our plan is not to gut the rewards out of Path of Exile. Okay. We play the game too and enjoy finding heaps of valuable items. Could an alternate version of the game with extreme item scarcity also be a fun experiment? Currently internally called hard mode is an entirely separate thing, and changes have not been folded in regular Path of Exile. Could have fooled me, to be honest with you. Please keep the feedback coming. We are reading, discussing, and continuing to make changes. I'm very sorry for the rough start, but I hope you continue to enjoy the Lake of Kalandra, Atlas Memories, and the other new content released in this expansion. I know it's a long video, but frankly, it has to be a long video. There's not really much that I could do about that. I really wanted to get granular when it came to all the different things that we had to talk about here, but the big takeaway is that they said keep the feedback coming. And I'm going to keep the feedback coming. That's what this video is. I'm going to keep trying to condense all of my thoughts and everything. I'm going to keep posting over on Twitter. I'm going to keep saying what I feel about it, and we're just going to continue on. Like, not really much has changed. I'm less upset with the fact of the communication, but I'm not really going to be very forgiving of it going forward at this point. You know, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice. I don't think I'm going to be around to be fooled a third time.